Oh man, I gotta do this report about superstition in the Renaissance, and I cannot figure out how to use this internet machine. Do you even know what superstition is, Tom? I have no idea.
Well, Mike, Google defines superstition as a widely held but unjustified belief in supernatural causation leading to certain consequences of an action or event, or a practice based on such a belief. So, what made the Renaissance so special when it came to superstition?
Ah, okay, now I know what superstition is. Stupid me. Anyways, superstition, back before the Renaissance, ran rampant, and people just put their faith blindly into things, followed religion, and basically didn't rely a lot on logic.
Well, why does that make the Renaissance any different?
I'm glad you asked that. Well, you see, in the Renaissance, there was a shift from believing in superstition to going to logic and thinking about, how your virtue can get things done. And people basically who put their faith into things and believed in superstition were mocked relentlessly.
So, Mike, how are they mocked? Do you have any specific examples of this?
As a matter of fact, I do. One of the great authors of the Renaissance, Giovanni Boccaccio, who wrote the Decameron, which I just happen to have sitting next to me for some reason, he mocked extensively the belief in superstition. In fact, in one story, there was a woman who was tricked into having sex with a monk because he told her that by sleeping with him, she would put the devil back in hell. In fact, at one point of this story, when she is approached by the women that live in the town that she lives in, Boccaccio had this to say. Before Nearball, her husband, had actually slept with her, the woman, Elbeck, she was questioned by the women of Gapsa about how she was serving God in the desert, and she replied she had served him by putting the devil back in hell, and Nearball had committed a terrible sin by stopping her from performing so worthy of a service. This comes from day 3, story 10 of the Decameron. And you see here, Boccaccio is making her out to be very gullible and stupid because of her belief that by actually sleeping with this monk, she was putting the devil back in hell. And on another similar story, there was which ironically enough involves more religious matters. There was a man who feigned being deaf-mute named Masetto Lamprechio, and he pretended to be mute, and the nuns took advantage of him and slept with him. Finally, he came clean and said that he could speak, and the nuns were flabbergasted that they were taken for fools, basically. And the corruption of the church and the false belief in superstition is mocked further when Boccaccio says, and so with Masetto's consent, they unanimously decided now that they all knew what the others had been doing, to persuade people living in the neighborhood that after a prolonged period of speechlessness, his ability to talk had been miraculously restored by the nuns' prayers and the virtues of the saint, after whom the convent was named. Here you see, Boccaccio is basically just ripping religion, and they're saying that the people will be so stupid to believe that the prayers just pretty much brought back his speech and his ability to hear and everything because they had just been praying for him.
So, Mike, was Boccaccio the only example of authors that mocked superstition, or were there others?
Oh, there were others. As a matter of fact, there was Machiavelli in one of the plays that he wrote, the Madragula. He had this one character named Nicaea, pronunciation I don't know, but he was pretty stupid, for lack of a better term. Machiavelli made him out to be an idiot. He went to a man he'd never met and believed his story immediately that he would help him conceive by using this magical plant. And as a matter of fact, in the story, the servant Ciro points out what an idiot he is. He looks at the audience and kind of tongue-in-cheek says, but here's the dottore who has a urine bottle in his hand. Who wouldn't laugh at this big fool? And I mean, that's pretty much like a Machiavelli winking at the audience, telling him how stupid he is. The character And you see is just made to be an idiot because he believes in superstition so much, and he's putting his blind faith into a plan, without looking at it logically whatsoever.
Hey, so what part of the Mandragula was that again? I might want to read that later.
That was actually chapter 2, book 4, where that quote came from.
Okay, cool. Cool. I'll definitely give that a look.
All right, and also, Machiavelli had more to say about the idea of superstition. Well, not about superstition, directly, but in The Prince, he talks about a lot of things like how to gain power, logical ways to gain power and to maintain power. As a matter of fact, in The Prince, he was quoted as saying, "Men almost always prefer to walk in paths marked out by others and pattern their actions through imitation. Even if he cannot follow other people's paths in every respect or attain the merit, virtue of his originals, a prudent man should always follow the footsteps of the great and imitate those who have been supreme." That's on page 15, by the way. And by saying that, Machiavelli is basically saying that instead of, relying on superstition, relying on divine powers, you should model yourself after the people who came before you logically. Instead of relying on superstition, you rely on your own virtue, your own merit to gain power, to advance in life.
So you've mentioned Boccaccio and Machiavelli. I know Leonardo da Vinci was also around during this time. Did he have any thoughts on the subject of superstition?
As a matter of fact, he did. Leonardo da Vinci, big, major figure of the Renaissance. He's the Renaissance man. He did everything, pretty much, And also, very good Ninja Turtle.
Actually, speaking of which, weren't you wearing Ninja Turtle pants before? What happened to those?
What are you talking about?
No, before you had different pants.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. Anyway,
Da Vinci. Da Vinci had a very strong-held belief on he basically believed that people buying into religion and the superstition was not a good idea. He believed in actually observing things, seeing things happen before your eyes. He was quoted in one paper on pages 6 through 7 of the Oxford Notebooks on True Science. He said, "For if we are doubtful about certainty of things that pass through the senses, how much more should we question the many things against which the senses rebel, such as the nature of God and the soul and the like, about which there are endless controversies. Experience does not feed investigators on dreams, but always proceeds from accurately determined first principles." You see, essentially what Da Vinci is saying there is that we should only trust the things that we can actually observe in front of us, the experiences that we can have. We shouldn't attribute things that happen to some superpower being or something coming from high above. We should just look at them as what they are. And basically, what he's saying here just represents the shift that went on from earlier thinking to the Renaissance thinking, which basically put down superstition.
so you mentioned that there was a shift in thinking, I guess, on superstition. Just because I'm not quite getting it exactly. So it shifted from what to what exactly?
Well, the shift really was, before the Renaissance, people really put their faith in, supernatural beings and superstitious things. They believed in all these higher powers that are responsible for everything. And during the Renaissance, we really saw these authors, or, not even the authors, just the people in general, start to, rely more on logic, more rely on, things they are actually experiencing. Science began to emerge. I wouldn't say they abandoned superstition completely, but they began to, move away from it and think maybe we should just rely on everything we experience, everything we observe. And that's evident in the way that some authors mocked people believing in superstition, and the way some authors like Da Vinci and Machiavelli talk about logic and the way it should be applied basically to everyday life and to every pursuit that you have. And, I mean, essentially, that's all we've got to say about it. Hey, I hope you enjoyed our video for the ILCS class. I'm Mike Serletti.
And I'm Tom Macari.
And basically that was our video about Superstition and how there was a shift away from it. And once again, I hope our citations were on point about the Prince, the Mandragula, the Decameron, and the scientific paper by Leonardo da Vinci.